What happens when a single mother, battered by life's unrelenting storms, crosses paths with a stranger who sees her pain in a way no one else ever has? This is a story of resilience, unexpected hope, and the quiet power of compassion, a tale that will grip your heart and leave you breathless by its end. In the sleepy town of Riverview, where time seemed to move as slowly as the river that gave it its name, life unfolded under the watchful branches of ancient oak trees. Their gnarled limbs stretched over cobblestone streets, casting dappled shadows on the lives of those who called this place home. But beneath the idyllic charm of Riverview lay untold stories of struggle, of dreams deferred, and of hearts fighting to hold on. At the heart of this town was Emma Carter, a woman whose life was a delicate balance between hope and despair. At 32, Emma carried herself with a quiet strength, though her warm brown eyes betrayed a weariness that seemed etched into her very soul. Her chestnut hair, often pulled back into a hurried ponytail, framed a face that rarely smiled anymore. Once she had been the girl who dreamed of painting murals that would brighten Riverview's gray walls, but those dreams had long been buried under the weight of reality. Now, Emma was a single mother to her 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, a bright-eyed child with a laugh that could light up even the darkest of days. Emma's days were spent behind the counter at Green Valley Market, the town's bustling grocery store that served as both a lifeline and a battleground. The store's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on shelves stocked with canned goods and fresh produce. It was the kind of place where neighbors exchanged pleasantries, but also where whispers of gossip and judgment lingered in the air. For Emma, it was a job that paid the bills, or at least tried to. Her cashier shifts stretched long into the evening, leaving her exhausted, her feet aching, and her mind racing with worries about the stack of unpaid bills waiting on her kitchen table. The apartment Emma and Sophie shared was a modest one-bedroom on the edge of Riverview, its walls papered with faded floral patterns and its floors creaking with every step. A small table in the corner held a pile of envelopes, electricity, rent, medical bills from Sophie's recent bout with bronchitis. Each one felt like a stone pressing down on Emma's chest. Yet, no matter how heavy life became, Emma's love for Sophie was her anchor. Every night, after tucking her daughter into bed, Emma would sit by her side, reading stories of faraway lands and brave heroes. "One day, Sophie," she'd whisper, brushing a lock of hair from her daughter's face, "we'll have adventures too. I promise." But promises were hard to keep in Riverview, especially for someone like Emma. At Green Valley Market, her days were not only long but laced with a cruelty that cut deeper than any bill. Her manager, Mark Thompson, was a man in his mid-40s, with a sharp jawline and a sharper tongue. His neatly pressed shirts and polished shoes gave him an air of authority, but his cold gray eyes revealed a mean streak that thrived on control. Mark had a way of making Emma feel invisible, worthless, as if her very existence was an inconvenience. "You're lucky to have this job, Carter," he'd sneer, his voice dripping with disdain as he hovered over her register. "A single mom like you? Most places wouldn't bother." The words stung, each one a needle piercing Emma's already fragile confidence. She'd bite her lip, nod, and keep scanning items, her hands moving mechanically as customers passed through her line. But Mark's cruelty wasn't confined to private moments. One busy Saturday, as the store buzzed with weekend shoppers, Emma fumbled a jar of pickles, sending it crashing to the floor. The glass shattered, green brine pooling at her feet. Before she could react, Mark's voice boomed across the store. "Clumsy as always, Carter. Clean it up, and don't expect overtime for your mistakes." Customers turned to stare, their pitying glances burning into Emma's skin. She knelt to clean the mess, her cheeks flushed with shame, while Sophie's voice echoed in her mind. "Why don't you smile anymore, Mommy?" That question haunted Emma as she scrubbed the floor, her hands trembling. Sophie had asked it just the night before, her small face peering up from her pillow, her blue eyes wide with worry. Emma had forced a smile, brushing it off with a quick, "I'm just tired, sweetheart." But the truth was heavier. She was tired of fighting, tired of scraping by, tired of feeling like she was failing the one person who mattered most. Yet, giving up wasn't an option. Every choice Emma made was for Sophie, to give her a life where she could dream without fear, where she wouldn't have to count pennies or hide from the world's harshness. The other employees at Green Valley Market weren't much help. Most kept their heads down, too afraid of Mark's wrath to challenge him. Sarah, a cashier in her late 20s with a penchant for gossip, was the exception. She didn't fear Mark, but she also didn't trust Emma. Sarah's sharp comments, "You're always so quiet. Emma, what are you hiding?" added another layer of tension to an already suffocating workplace. Emma tried to ignore her, focusing on her work and the thought of Sophie waiting at home, but the weight of it all was crushing. Riverview itself seemed to mirror Emma's struggles. The town's charm was a facade, hiding the quiet desperation of those who lived paycheck to paycheck. The oak trees, once symbols of protection, now felt like sentinels guarding secrets no one dared to speak. Behind closed doors, people whispered about neighbors who'd lost jobs, homes, or hope. Emma knew those whispers well. She'd heard them about herself. "Poor Emma Carter," they'd say, "trying so hard, but she never get out of that hole." She hated their pity, but part of her feared they were right. Still, Emma clung to a flicker of hope, however faint. She'd look at Sophie, coloring pictures of rainbows and castles, and remind herself why she kept going. She dreamed of a day when she could afford to take Sophie to the city zoo, or maybe even save enough for a small vacation. But those dreams felt distant, like stars obscured by Riverview's cloudy skies. What Emma didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that a single moment, a single stranger, was about to step into her life and change its course. Forever dot as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emma locked up her register and prepared for another long walk home. She glanced at the oak trees lining the street, their branches swaying in the evening breeze. For a moment, she allowed herself to hope that tomorrow might be different. But in Riverview, hope was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the weight of reality. Little did she know, someone was already watching, someone who saw not just her struggles, but her strength, and he was determined to make a difference. In the quiet hum of Riverview, where the rhythm of life was as predictable as the chime of the town's old church bell, a stranger stepped into Green Valley Market one sunny Monday morning. His presence was unremarkable at first, a tall man, in his late 40s, dressed in a simple plaid flannel shirt and worn jeans, blending seamlessly with the shoppers who shuffled through the aisles. But this man was no ordinary customer. His name was James Sullivan, and he carried a secret that would soon ripple through the lives of those around him. As he grabbed a shopping basket and moved through the store, his salt and pepper hair caught the light, and his kind, observant eyes scanned the shelves with a purpose few could guess. James was the CEO of Sullivan Enterprises, the corporation that owned Green Valley Market and dozens of other stores across the country. He had come to Riverview not to shop, but to uncover the truth about how his company was run. James's decision to go undercover wasn't born of whim. It stemmed from a promise he'd made years ago, one rooted in a memory that still haunted him. His mother, Ellen Sullivan, had been a cashier in a small grocery store, much like this one, working long hours to raise James and his sister after their father left. Ellen was a woman of quiet dignity, but James remembered the night she'd come home with red-rimmed eyes, her spirit worn down by a manager who belittled her at every turn. "They think you're nothing when you're behind a counter," she'd once told him, her voice heavy with resignation. That pain had driven James to build a company where employees were valued, not diminished. But recent reports from Green Valley Market high turnover, anonymous complaints about management suggested his vision wasn't being upheld. Riverview, with its solid sales but troubling whispers, was the perfect place to start his investigation. As James wandered the aisles, he took in the store's details with a practiced eye. The shelves were meticulously stocked, the floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the produce section boasted apples so shiny they could have been props in a commercial. But beneath the polished surface, there was a tension in the air, like a storm brewing just out of sight. Employees moved quickly, their heads down, avoiding eye contact with one another. A young stock boy flinched when a door slammed in the back. Two cashiers whispered nervously near the break room, their voices dropping when a man's sharp tone cut through the store. James followed the sound, his basket swinging lightly in his hand, until he saw her, Emma Carter. Emma stood at register 3, her hands moving with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Her dark hair was tucked into a loose ponytail, and her green apron was slightly wrinkled, as if she'd pulled it on in a rush. But it was her eyes that caught James's attention. They were warm, like polished mahogany, but clouded with a sadness that seemed to weigh her down. As she scanned a customer's groceries, her lips curved into a polite smile that never reached her eyes. James lingered near the magazine rack, pretending to browse, but his focus was on Emma. There was something about her, a quiet resilience, a strength that shone through her exhaustion that reminded him of his mother. Before he could approach, a voice sliced through the hum of the store. "Carter, you're moving like molasses today. Pick up the pace." It was Mark Thompson, the store manager, striding toward Emma's register with a clipboard in hand. His neatly pressed shirt and slick-back hair gave him the look of a man who thrived on authority, but his cold gray eyes revealed a cruelty that made James's jaw tighten. Emma flinched at Mark's words, her hands faltering for a moment before she resumed scanning. "Sorry, Mr. Thompson," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Mark snorted, loud enough for nearby customers to glance over. "Sorry doesn't cut it. Do your job, or I'll find someone who can." The words hung in the air, heavy and humiliating, as Emma kept her head down, her cheeks flushing. James's heart sank. He'd seen this before, the way a manager's words could strip someone of their dignity. He paid for his items at another register, stealing glances at Emma as she worked through the line of customers. Her hands trembled slightly, but she never stopped, never complained. As he left the store, the weight of what he'd witnessed settled over him. This wasn't just about one employee. It was about a culture that allowed someone like Mark to thrive. James knew he couldn't walk away, not yet. Over the next few days, James returned to Green Valley Market, each visit deepening his understanding of the store's undercurrents. He noticed how employees avoided Mark, their shoulders tensing when he passed. He saw Sarah, a cashier with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, rolling her eyes when Emma offered to help with a heavy load. "Always trying to be the hero," Sarah muttered, loud enough for Emma to hear. Emma's face fell, but she said nothing, returning to her register with a quiet sigh. James also noticed the way customers responded to Emma, some with kindness, others with impatience, as if her exhaustion was an inconvenience to their day. On his third visit, James decided to break the ice. He approached Emma's register with a small basket of items, a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a pack of gum. As she scanned his purchases, he offered a warm smile. "You're quick with those hands," he said, his tone light but genuine. "I've been in a lot of stores, and you make this look easy." Emma looked up, startled, her eyes searching his face for any hint of mockery. Finding none, she managed a shy smile. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice tinged with surprise. "I'm just doing my job." "I'm James," he said, extending a hand. "Just passing through Riverview." Emma hesitated before shaking his hand, her grip firm but cautious. "Emma," she replied, her eyes still wary. James noticed the faint blush on her cheeks, the way she glanced around as if expecting Mark to interrupt. He kept the conversation brief, asking about the store's best deals, but his mind was already racing. Emma wasn't just another employee. She was someone carrying a burden too heavy for one person to bear. As James left the store, he paused outside, glancing back through the glass doors. Emma was still at her register, her head bowed as she scanned another customer's items. He thought of his mother again, of the night she'd come home too tired to eat, her hands raw from hours at the register. James had built Sullivan Enterprises to honor her, to ensure no one else felt the way she had. But here, in Riverview, that promise was being broken. He couldn't reveal his identity, not yet. He needed to understand Emma's story, to see the full scope of what was happening at Green Valley Market. But one thing was clear. Emma Carter was at the heart of it, and James was determined to help her, even if she didn't know it yet. The sun was setting over Riverview, casting long shadows across the oak-lined streets. James walked to his car, his basket of groceries forgotten in his hand. He knew this was only the beginning. The truth about Green Valley Market was starting to unravel, and with it, the chance to make a difference, not just for Emma, but for everyone who'd been silenced by fear. As he drove away, the church bell chimed in the distance, a reminder that in Riverview, change was coming, whether the town was ready for it or not. The air in Green Valley Market felt heavier with each passing day, as if the fluorescent lights were pressing down on the employees, amplifying the tension that simmered beneath the store's polished exterior. Emma Carter stood at her register, her hands moving swiftly over the scanner, but her mind was elsewhere, on the stack of bills waiting at home, on Sophie's cough that hadn't quite gone away, on the gnawing fear that she was failing her daughter. The oak trees outside the store's glass doors swayed in the breeze, their branches casting fleeting shadows that seemed to mirror the weight on Emma's heart. She had learned to keep her head down, to swallow the sharp words of her manager, Mark Thompson, but each day chipped away at her resolve. Little did she know, the stranger who had been watching her, James Sullivan, was about to draw closer, driven by a growing sense of urgency to right the wrongs he'd witnessed. James returned to Green Valley Market daily, his flannel shirt and jeans a familiar sight among the shoppers. He was careful not to draw attention, blending in as just another customer, but his eyes missed nothing. He noticed the way employees scurried past Mark, their voices hushed, their shoulders hunched as if bracing for a blow. He saw the stock boy, barely out of high school, wince when Mark barked orders from across the store. And he saw Emma, her quiet strength fraying under the relentless pressure of Mark's cruelty. James had come to Riverview to uncover the truth about his company, but what he found was a story that hit closer to home than he'd expected, a story of a woman fighting to hold on, just as his mother had. Mark's behavior grew bolder, as if he sensed no one would challenge him. One afternoon, as Emma balanced a stack of grocery bags for an elderly customer, Mark stormed over, his clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Carter, you're holding up the line again," he snapped, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "If you can't handle a simple transaction, maybe you're in the wrong job." Emma's hands froze on the scanner, her cheeks burning as customers stared. The elderly woman offered a sympathetic smile, but it did little to soften the sting. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark smirked, leaning closer. "You should be. Single moms don't get to make mistakes around here." The words cut deep, and Emma felt her throat tighten, but she kept working, her hands trembling as she scanned the next item. James, standing near the produce aisle, overheard every word. His jaw clenched, a familiar anger rising in his chest. The same anger he'd felt as a boy watching his mother endure similar humiliations. He wanted to intervene, to reveal his identity as the CEO of Sullivan Enterprises and put an end. Mark's reign, but he knew he needed more than a single incident. He needed to understand the full scope of the problem, to ensure any action he took would protect Emma and the others. So he stayed silent, watching, his resolve hardening with each passing moment that the tension wasn't just coming from Mark. Sarah, the sharp-tongued cashier who worked the register next to Emma's, had taken to making snide remarks that added another layer of strain. Sarah was in her late 20s, with neatly manicured nails and a habit of tossing her blonde hair when she spoke. She'd always been quick to charm customers, but with Emma, her words were laced with venom. "You're always so serious, Emma," Sarah said one slow afternoon, leaning against her register. "What? You think you're better than us because you're always rushing around?" Emma glanced up, startled, but said nothing, focusing on straightening her apron. Sarah's lips curled into a smirk. "Or maybe you're just trying to impress someone, like that guy who keeps coming to your line." She nodded toward the aisle where James had been earlier, her tone dripping with insinuation. Emma's heart sank. She'd noticed James's visits, his kind words, his warm smile, but she hadn't thought much of it, just a friendly customer, nothing more. The idea that Sarah was spinning it into something else made her stomach churn. "I'm just doing my job," Emma said quietly, but Sarah's words lingered, planting a seed of doubt. Was she being watched? Judged? The last thing she needed was more attention, especially with Mark breathing down her neck. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with Sophie's medical bills piling up. Just last week, Sophie's cough had worsened, and the doctor had prescribed a new medication that cost more than Emma's weekly grocery budget. She'd skipped meals to make ends meet, telling Sophie she wasn't hungry, but the hunger in her heart was harder to ignore. James, sensing Emma's guardedness, decided it was time to build a bridge. On his next visit, he approached her register with a small basket of items, a pack of cookies, a bottle of orange juice, and a coloring book he'd picked up for Sophie. "For a kid you might know," he said with a grin as he handed her the book. Emma's eyes widened, a flicker of warmth breaking through her usual reserve. "That's really kind of you," she said, her voice soft but genuine. "My daughter, Sophie, loves to color." James nodded, leaning casually against the counter. "She sounds like a great kid. You must be proud." Emma's smile faltered, her eyes dropping to the scanner. "I am. She's everything to me. I want to give her more than this." Her voice cracked, and she quickly looked away, focusing on bagging his items. James saw the pain in her words, the weight of dreams she'd buried to survive. "You're doing more than you think," he said gently. "Kids notice the love, not the stuff." Emma looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, she let herself believe he meant it, but years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious. "Thanks," she said, handing him his receipt. "I hope you're right." As James left, he felt a pang of guilt for not telling her who he was. But he needed time to learn more, to see how deep the rot went in Green Valley Market. He couldn't help Emma until he understood her world completely. That evening, as Emma walked home under the fading light of Riverview's oak trees, she replayed James's words in her mind. They were a small comfort, a rare moment of kindness in a world that felt increasingly cold. But when she reached her apartment, the sight of Sophie curled up on the couch, clutching a stuffed bear and coughing softly, brought reality crashing back. Emma knelt beside her, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her daughter's face. "We're okay, sweetheart," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. The bills on the table loomed like a storm cloud, and Mark's words echoed in her ears. She was tired, so tired of fighting a battle she wasn't sure she could win. James, meanwhile, sat in his rented car outside the store, jotting notes in a small notebook. He'd seen enough to know that Mark's behavior wasn't just a bad day, it was a pattern. But he'd also seen something else. Emma's strength, her quiet determination to keep going for her daughter. It reminded him of his mother, of the nights she'd stayed up late sewing his school clothes, hiding her own struggles behind a smile. James knew he had to act, but he had to do it carefully. Revealing his identity too soon could backfire, especially with someone like Mark in charge. As the church bell tolled in the distance, James made a silent vow. He would help Emma, not just for her sake, but for the promise he'd made to his mother years ago to never let anyone feel as small as she had. The air in Green Valley Market crackled with an unspoken tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Emma Carter stood at her register, her hands moving mechanically over the scanner, but her heart was a tight knot of dread. The past week had been a gauntlet of Mark Thompson's relentless criticism, each jab sharper than the last. And the weight of her struggles, Sophie's lingering cough, the unpaid bills, the whispers from coworkers like seraphobe, like a tide pulling her under. Outside, the oak trees of Riverview swayed under a graying sky, their shadows stretching long and thin, as if reaching for something just out of grasp. Emma didn't know it yet, but today, everything was about to change. James Sullivan had been a quiet presence in the store for days, his flannel shirt and easy smile blending into the crowd of shoppers. But his eyes were sharp, cataloging every detail. The fear in the employees' glances, the way Mark's voice could silence a room, the exhaustion etched into Emma's face. As the CEO of Sullivan Enterprises, James had come to Riverview to uncover the truth about his company's operations, but what he found was a wound that needed healing. Emma's resilience, her quiet strength in the face of Mark's cruelty, had struck a chord deep within him, echoing memories of his mother's own struggles. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. The time for watching was over. The morning started. Like any other, with the store buzzing as customers filed through the aisles. Emma was scanning a cart full of groceries when Sophie, her 6-year-old daughter, slipped into the store, her small backpack bouncing as she ran to her mother's side. It was a rare day when Emma's neighbor, who usually watched Sophie, was unavailable, and Emma had no choice but to bring her to work during a short break. Sophie's blonde curls bobbed as she clutched a drawing she'd made, a rainbow over a field of flowers, and her blue eyes sparkled with pride. "Mommy, look what I made for you," she said, holding up the paper. Emma's face softened, a rare smile breaking through. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said, kneeling to hug her daughter. For a moment, the weight of the world lifted, but the moment was short-lived. Mark Thompson emerged from his office, his clipboard in hand, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Sophie. "Carter, what is this?" he barked, striding toward the register. His voice cut through the store, drawing the attention of customers and employees alike. Emma stood quickly, pulling Sophie behind her. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice steady but tight. "My neighbor couldn't watch her today. She's just here for a bit." Mark's lips curled into a sneer. "This isn't a daycare, Carter. You think you can just bring your kid here and slack off? You're already on thin ice." Emma's heart pounded, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. She wanted to snap back, to tell Mark he had no right to speak to her that way, but the fear of losing her job, of losing the fragile stability she'd built for Sophie, kept her silent. Sophie, sensing the tension, clung to her mother's leg, her small face crumpling. "Mommy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Before Emma could respond, Mark leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You're a liability, Carter. One more mistake, and you're out." You and your kid can figure out how to survive on the street." The words hit like a slap, and Sophie let out a soft sob, burying her face in Emma's apron. Customers nearby shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, others looking away. Sarah, at the next register, smirked, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. Emma felt the world close in, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She wanted to scream, to run, to take Sophie and disappear from Riverview forever. But she couldn't. She had to stay, for Sophie's sake. James, standing near the canned goods aisle, witnessed it all. His hands tightened around his shopping basket, the plastic creaking under his grip. He'd seen Mark's cruelty before, but this was different. This was a child, caught in the crossfire of a man's ego. The memory of his mother, humiliated, in front of him as a boy, flashed through his mind, and something inside him snapped. He couldn't stand by any longer. Dropping his basket, he strode toward the back of the store, pulling out his phone as he went. It was time to act. That evening, James sat in a quiet diner on the edge of Riverview, the neon sign outside casting a red glow across his table. He dialed the regional manager, Karen Ellis, and revealed his identity. "This is James Sullivan," he said, his voice firm. "I've been at Green Valley Market for a week, and what I've seen is unacceptable. Mark Thompson is terrorizing his staff, especially Emma Carter. I want a full investigation, starting tomorrow." Karen, stunned, promised to act immediately. James wasn't done. He called a private investigator he trusted, asking for a discreet review of Mark's conduct, rumors of favoritism, missing, inventory, anything that could justify decisive action. The next day, James returned to the store, his heart heavy but determined. He needed to talk to Emma, to understand her story before he made his next move. He found her outside during her break, sitting on a bench near the store's entrance, her head in her hands. Sophie was at home with a neighbor now, but the memory of her daughter's tears lingered in Emma's eyes. James approached slowly, his voice gentle. "Emma, are you okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. Emma looked up, startled, and quickly wiped her face. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice betrayed her. "You don't have to pretend," James said, his tone warm but firm. "I saw what happened yesterday. No one should have to endure that." Emma shook her head, her eyes glistening. "You don't understand. I need this job. Sophie needs me to keep it together. I can't fight him." Her voice broke, and she looked away, ashamed of her vulnerability. James leaned forward, his voice steady. "You're not alone in this, Emma. I'm going to help you. I promise. But I need to know more about what's been happening." Emma hesitated, her instinct screaming to stay silent. But something in James's eyes, genuine, unwavering, made her trust him. Just a little. She told him about Mark's constant belittling, the extra shifts he piled on her, the way he mocked her as a single mother. She spoke of Sophie's illness, the medical bills, the fear that she'd never give her daughter the life she deserved. James listened, his heart aching with every word. When she finished, he took a deep breath. "Emma, I'm not just a customer," he said, his voice low. "I'm James Sullivan, the CEO of Sullivan Enterprises. I own this store, and I'm going to make this right." Emma stared at him, her mind reeling. "You're what?" she stammered, her eyes wide with disbelief. James nodded, his expression earnest. "I came here to see how my stores are run, and what I've seen Mark's behavior, the way you've been treated, it's not what my company stands for. I'm going to fix this, but I need your help. Will you trust me?" Emma's breath caught, a mix of hope and fear swirling in her chest. She wanted to believe him, but years of broken promises made her wary. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "I'm not strong enough." "You are," James said, his voice unwavering. "You've been strong for Sophie every day. Let me help you carry the load." Emma looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception, but found only sincerity. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope, a fragile, dangerous thing, but real. She nodded slowly, her voice barely audible. Okay. As James walked away, his mind raced with plans. Mark would face consequences, but it had to be done carefully, with evidence to ensure he couldn't retaliate. Emma's trust was a start, but the battle was far from over. The storm that had been brewing in Green Valley Market was about to break, and James was ready to face it for Emma, for Sophie, and for the promise he'd made to his mother long ago. The sun rose over Riverview with a gentle warmth, casting golden light through the oak trees that lined the streets. For the first time in years, Emma Carter felt a flicker of possibility as she walked into Green Valley Market. The store, once a battlefield where her spirit was tested daily, now held the promise of something new. James Sullivan's revelation that he was the CEO of Sullivan Enterprises and determined to right the wrongs he'd witnessed had upended her world. Mark Thompson, the manager who had made her life a waking nightmare, was gone, fired after. James's investigation uncovered a pattern of bullying and mismanagement. In his place, Emma had been offered the role of assistant manager, a chance she could scarcely believe was real. But as she stepped into the store, her green apron replaced with a crisp name tag that read, Assistant Manager. Doubt gnawed at her. Could she rise to this challenge, or would she crumble under the weight of her own fears? The first days were a whirlwind. James, still in Riverview to oversee the transition, worked with the regional manager, Karen Ellis, to implement changes. Mark's termination was announced in a staff meeting, met with stunned silence and a few relieved sighs. James outlined a new vision for Green Valley Market: better wages, regular training, and a culture of respect. He introduced Emma as the new assistant manager, praising her dedication and resilience. Emma Carter has shown what it means to work hard and care deeply, he said, his voice steady. She's the kind of leader this store needs. The room erupted in polite applause, but Emma felt the weight of every gaze. Some employees nodded in support. Others, like Sarah, the sharp-tongued cashier, crossed their arms, their skepticism palpable. Emma's new role was daunting. She was tasked with overseeing schedules, handling customer complaints, and ensuring the store ran smoothly. The first morning, she stood in the break room, clipboard in hand, trying to assign shifts while her hands trembled. She'd never led anyone. Before, her days had been spent surviving, not directing. When she asked a stock boy to restock the produce section, her voice wavered, and he hesitated, as if testing her authority. Sarah, meanwhile, wasted no time showing doubt. Assistant manager? She muttered to a coworker during a lull. She's just James's pet project, but she won't last a week. The words reached Emma's ears, stinging like salt in a wound. She wanted to prove them wrong, but the fear that Sarah was right, that she wasn't cut out for this, kept her awake. At night, the challenges didn't end with her coworkers. Mark's departure had sparked a backlash from his family, who lived on the outskirts of Riverview. His wife, Linda, confronted Emma outside the store one evening, her voice sharp with anger. You think you're some big shot now? She snapped. Mark worked hard for this place, and you got him fired with your sob story. Emma stood frozen, her heart racing. She hadn't asked for Mark to be fired. She'd only told James the truth. But the accusation cut deep, feeding her self-doubt. She apologized, her voice barely audible, and hurried away, the weight of Linda's words lingering like a shadow. James, sensing Emma's struggle, offered support without overstepping. He arranged for a financial advisor to help her manage her debts, easing the burden of Sophie's medical bills. He also set up a scholarship fund for Sophie, ensuring her education would be secure. You've got this, Emma, he told her during a quiet moment in the store's office. You've been leading all along, keeping Sophie safe, pushing through every day. This is just a new way to show it." His words were a lifeline, but Emma couldn't shake the fear that she'd let him down, that she'd let Sophie down. Determined to prove herself, Emma threw herself into her new role. She started small, organizing the stockroom to streamline inventory, a task Mark had neglected. She listened to her co-workers' concerns, something Mark had never done, and implemented a suggestion box for ideas. When a shipment of dairy products arrived late, threatening to disrupt the store's schedule, Emma stayed late, coordinating with suppliers and rallying the team to get it sorted. The stock boy who'd hesitated before now nodded with respect, calling her Miss Carter instead of Emma. Slowly, she began to feel the stirrings of confidence, like a seed taking root. But Sarah remained a thorn in her side. When Emma organized a community event, a children's day at the store with face painting and games, inspired by Sophie's love of coloring, Sarah spread rumors that Emma was trying to show off to James. The event was a success, with families flooding the store and Sophie beaming as she handed out balloons. But Sarah's whispers reached Emma's ears. "She's just sucking up to the boss," Sarah told a group of cashiers, her voice loud enough to carry. Emma, overhearing, felt her confidence waver. She confronted Sarah in the break room, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm doing this for the store, Sarah, not for anyone else. If you have a problem, say it to my face." Sarah blinked, caught off guard, and muttered something before walking away. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step Emma was finding her voice at home. Sophie was thriving. The scholarship fund meant Emma could afford better medicine, and Sophie's cough was finally fading. One evening, as they sat together coloring a picture of a castle, Sophie looked up, her blue eyes bright. "Mommy, you smile more now," she said. Emma's heart swelled, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm trying, sweetheart," she said, pulling Sophie into a hug. The moment was a reminder of why she kept going, why she couldn't give in to doubt. James, meanwhile, was reshaping Green Valley Market. He introduced mandatory training on workplace respect, ensuring no one would face Mark's cruelty again. He spent time with the staff, listening to their stories, and implemented a bonus program for exceptional performance. The store began to feel different, lighter, as if the air itself had changed. Customers noticed, too, lingering longer and complementing the friendlier atmosphere. But James knew his work wasn't done. He met with Corinne to discuss promoting Emma further in the future, but only when she was ready. "She's got potential," he told Corinne, "but she needs to believe it herself." One afternoon, as Emma helped a customer with a large order, she caught sight of James watching from across the store. He gave her a nod, a small gesture that felt like a vote of confidence. For the first time, Emma felt like she belonged in her new role, not as a fraud, but as someone capable of leading. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Sarah's resentment, the lingering whispers of Mark's family, and her own doubts would test her. But as she looked out at the store, at the employees working together and the customers smiling, she felt a spark of pride. Green Valley Market was changing, and so was she. Outside, the oak trees stood tall, their branches swaying in the breeze. Riverview was still a town of secrets and struggles, but for Emma, it was beginning to feel like a place where hope could take root. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but for the first time, she believed she could face them, not just for Sophie, but for herself. The golden light of a Riverview autumn filtered through the oak trees, casting a warm glow over Green Valley Market. The store, once a place of stifled dreams and whispered fears, now hummed with a new energy. Employees greeted customers with genuine smiles. The shelves gleamed with care, and the air felt lighter, as if the weight of Mark Thompson's cruelty had been lifted for good. Emma Carter stood at the front of the store, her assistant manager. badge pinned proudly to her crisp green apron. She was no longer the woman who flinched at every sharp word, but a leader who moved with quiet confidence, her warm brown eyes reflecting a strength she'd only begun to recognize. The journey hadn't been easy, but as she watched Sophie skip through the aisles, clutching a new coloring book, Emma felt something she hadn't in years: hope. Months had passed since James Sullivan, the CEO of Sullivan Enterprises, revealed his identity and set in motion the changes that transformed Green Valley Market. Mark was gone, his firing a swift consequence of James's investigation, which uncovered not only his bullying but also discrepancies in inventory records that suggested he'd been skimming supplies. The regional manager, Karen Ellis, had implemented James's reforms: a fair wage increase, regular training, and a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. Emma, now assistant manager, had become the heart of the store's revival. She led with empathy, listening to her team's ideas and fostering a sense of community that had been absent under Mark's reign. The suggestion box she'd introduced overflowed with notes, from requests for better break-room chairs to ideas for community events. Emma read each one, determined to make every voice heard. Her growth wasn't without challenges. Sarah, the cashier who'd once spread rumors about Emma, had softened slightly after their confrontation, but her resentment lingered. When Emma organized the Children's Day event, a vibrant afternoon of face painting, games, and free snacks that drew families from across Riverview, Sarah had stayed late to help, albeit grudgingly. "You're good at this," Sarah admitted as they cleaned up, her tone reluctant but sincere. Emma smiled, offering a quiet, "Thanks for helping." It wasn't friendship, but it was progress, a sign that even the deepest divides could begin to heal. The event had been a triumph, with Sophie's laughter ringing out as she handed out balloons, her cough now a distant memory thanks to the better medicine Emma could afford. The scholarship fund James had set up for Sophie ensured her future was bright, a gift that still brought tears to Emma's eyes when she thought of it. Beyond the store, Emma's life was transforming. The financial advisor James had connected her with helped her create a budget, paying down her debts and setting aside savings for the first time. She and Sophie moved into a slightly larger apartment, one with a small balcony where they planted flowers together, their laughter mingling with the breeze. One evening, as they colored a picture of a castle under a starry sky, Sophie looked up, her blue eyes sparkling. "Mommy, are we happy now?" she asked. Emma's heart swelled, and she pulled her daughter close. "Yes, sweetheart," she sighed, her voice thick with emotion. "We're getting there." James remained a quiet presence, checking in on the store's progress, but giving Emma space to lead. He'd seen something in her from the start, a resilience that mirrored his mother's, a woman who'd faced her own battles behind a counter years ago. One crisp afternoon, as the store prepared for a community fundraiser to support local families in need, Emma found James in the office, reviewing reports. She took a deep breath, her hands steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "Mr. Sullivan," she began, "I need to thank you for seeing me, for believing in me. I didn't think I could do this, but you gave me a chance." James looked up, his salt and pepper hair catching the light, his kind eyes softening. "You gave yourself this chance, Emma," he said. "I just opened the door. But there's something I need to tell you." He paused, his expression turning reflective. "My mother was like you, a single mom, working a job that tried to break her. I built this company to honor her, to make sure no one else felt the way she did. When I saw you, I saw her strength. That's why I had to help." Emma's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for everything." James smiled, a warmth in his gaze that felt like a promise kept. "You're welcome, Emma. Now go show Riverview what you're made of." And she did. The fundraiser was a success, raising enough to help 3 families pay their bills, with Emma at the helm, organizing volunteers and speaking to the crowd with a confidence she'd never known she had. Green Valley Market became a beacon in Riverview, a place where people didn't just shop but connected. Employees shared stories during breaks, customers lingered to chat, and the oak trees outside seemed to stand a little taller, as if proud of the town's new spirit. Emma, once invisible, was now a leader respected by her team and admired by the community. She never forgot her roots, always making time to mentor new hires, especially those who reminded her of her former self. Quiet, struggling, but full of potential. This story of Emma Carter and James Sullivan is more than a tale of one woman's triumph. It's a testament to the transformative power of kindness. Emma's journey teaches us that resilience, though often forged in pain, can bloom into strength when nurtured by compassion. James's decision to act not out of obligation, but from a deep well of empathy, reminds us that one person's belief in another can change a life. In a world quick to judge, to overlook, this story challenges us to see the unseen, to lift up those who feel small, and to recognize that hope can spark in the most unexpected places. It's a call to action, to extend a hand, to listen, to make a difference, no matter how small. For Emma, for Sophie, for Riverview, kindness was the key that unlocked a brighter future. Let it be yours. As Emma stood outside the store, watching Sophie chase a butterfly under the oak trees, she felt a peace she'd never known. Her journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more doubts, but she was ready. Riverview, with its secrets and struggles, was her home, and she was determined to make it better, one kind act at a time. James, preparing to leave for his next store visit, gave her a final nod, a silent acknowledgement of her strength. The church bell tolled in the distance, its chime a reminder that in Riverview, change wasn't just possible, it was happening. This is the kind of story we share at Legacy Stories, tales of courage, hope, and the human spirit that inspire us to be better, to do better. If Emma and James's journey touched your heart, join us for more. Subscribe to Legacy Stories on YouTube, where we bring you weekly stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Share this story with someone who needs a spark of hope today, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Together, we can spread kindness and build a legacy of change. Thank you for being part of our community.